Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about The Last of Us Season 1, Episode 1. It's called When You're Lost in the Darkness. I will start spoiler free because it is the first episode, and I will warn you before I go into spoilers in a little bit. I'll give some general impressions first. This is the new HBO show based on the video game, the Naughty Dog video game. And for context here, I actually have played The Last of Us and The Last of Us 2. This is very much the perspective of someone coming at this as already been a huge fan of the games and the story and knowing where it's going to go, barring any deviations that may pop up. So there may be some rare instances where I want to talk about future games stuff, and if I do, I'll give like an extra spoiler warning right at the very end, but I don't necessarily think I'm going to do that often, if ever. But if I do have to talk about future game stuff, I'll spoiler wall that a second time for people who don't know the games. First things first. Premise of the show, premise of the story is it's kind of like a zombie style outbreak, but it's these spores, although I don't know if it's spores in the show necessarily, but it wasn't the games, but it's fungus, and we get this zombie-like infection that spreads, and it's mostly set 20 years after the infection has spread, and we're in a post-apocalyptic version of 2023, where Joel is our main character, and he is tasked ultimately with transporting Ellie, but that's only just kind of starting to get to that point by the time we get to, the end of this episode. So I won't even go into any of that now. But there are zombie-like people that are running around like rage virus style, and there's more as well, which obviously I won't spoil yet. But if you've seen any of the imagery from the games, you'll know that there's more severe infected types of people and things like that. The big thing, though, is that it's very much a sort of father and surrogate daughter type story set in a sort of post-apocalyptic zombie-style world. That is The Last of Us. And this first episode is pretty much fantastic. It is everything I think I could have ever wanted from an adaptation of the source material. I think when I was young and I really loved the Resident Evil games and I dreamed of what a Resident Evil like movie or TV show could be, and then every single opportunity they've had, they have thoroughly stabbed me in the heart with like the sheer disappointment at every single turn. But Last of Us is already such a good story. It's already like so like praised in its narrative and its writing, and it does use its game mechanics to like tell its story in a way that makes the interactivity part of how it enhances the character journey, right? It makes you feel the same things as Joel as you're playing it, and that like in turn enhances the story. You do things a little bit differently when you do a film or a TV show, but the way this was nailing like elements of the start of the first game, which this is the story of, were kind of perfect. Like it obviously embellishes and adds some stuff to like parts of the story. It truncates some of the other things, some of the stuff that's more of a gameplay thing, where there's an entire encounter that they sort of gloss over in this first episode that in the game is like 25 minutes of like fighting through bad guys. There's no need for that in here, right? It would be irrelevant because it's not a video game. But it adds extra little character beats. One of the early plot details in this episode is that Joel's daughter Sarah in 2003 wants to fix his watch that's broken, and that's brought up in the video game, but in the show there's extra scenes, there's some build up to it, because we actually see her go to a watch repair dude and get it fixed. We see some of these things playing out, and that was actually really exciting as a fan of the story in the game anyway, is that I was sort of recognizing the stuff that we're adding like before the parts that are in the game. I was seeing how they were kind of building up to some of those moments. So no, I think the performances in this first episode are exceptional. Joel, played by Pedro Pascal here, like obviously Troy Baker in the video games, like he embodies the character, he nails it. There's times where it sounds like the character from the game. The personalities there, the hints of like what he can be and what he could be are showing all the way through. There's moments that it takes straight from the game where he's with his daughter, where it nails the dynamic. It makes you care about their relationship. Their chemistry is just as good as it was in the game. There's a direct line of dialogue taken from the game early on, particularly for the daughter Sarah, which it was like weird just like hearing it again because it sounded exactly like the game, and I mean that in like the best possible way. And then obviously later in the episode we get introduced to Ellie, played by Bella Ramsey. She also embodies the character of Ellie. Like, there's moments where she's yelling mother effers and it sounds like Ellie from the games, and it really felt like they were nailing the dynamic. Like, it feels like they're really, and obviously it helps that Neil Druckmann, who wrote the games and directed the games, is like the co-writer with Craig Mazin, who worked on Chernobyl, which is a fantastic miniseries at HBO a couple of years ago. So you've got, you know, the talent behind it to make it work, but they're, you know, they're taking it seriously. It's not just this, you know, video game movie that's been churned out quickly with some broad elements there. There's like actual genuine attempts to turn this into a prestige piece of television where the character motivations all make sense, the suspense is there, the money's there for the world, where, you know, the you see this post-apocalyptic world and it's all it's there. I feel like they're not like holding back. I don't feel like there's anything being lost because we're doing it live action instead of it being in a video game anymore. Like, I'm seeing some visuals, especially towards the end of this episode, and I'm like, this is what was in the game, but I'm seeing it in live action and it looks great. It feels super tense and eerie. There's a sneaking around in the dark with the flashlights and all that stuff. All of it was pitch perfect. Hell, speaking of people nailing their characters from the games, but the one that really stuck out to me was Tommy, played by Gabriel from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And one of the more recent Terminator movies. He sounded like the brother from the game, like Tommy. Again, the chemistry with him and Joel, perfect. It just it felt exactly, and this is the thing. I'm speaking here largely in terms of adaptation, where they're doing a great job of feeling like the same characters that I remember from that story. But I think even from like a newcomer perspective, all of these characters are very well set up in that it establishes that Joel's a struggling father with his daughter. He's a single parent, right? And his brother's around, but he's a single parent. But they're very likable. They have this chemistry where they're cracking jokes with each other at breakfast. They're cracking jokes again when he gets home late. There's all these little things that really do well. One of the big sequences that they really do a good job of like mimicking the game is the truck ride when they leave the house, sort of, you know, when things start to go awry, shall we say. And a lot of it's shot from that camera angle where we're sort of in the back seat looking between the two, you know, between Joel and Tommy, and we're just seeing glimpses of the road ahead out through the front of the car, or the truck, sorry, and we're seeing, you know, people running around, we're seeing the odd explosion, we're seeing flashing lights, all these things. That was like eerie, just how much it felt like the game. It cut away occasionally, but it mostly stuck to it. Kept returning to that shot because that was the shot that it felt like in the game. It felt like it was really going out above and beyond, and that it wanted to adapt the story for this medium, but also keep the feeling that these moments had originally, which is worth doing in this case because those moments were exceptionally crafted in the first place. So it does a really great job of bringing it all together. And so from an adaptation point of view, episode 1 is like already like, you know, is a dream come true. And that's saying something because video game adaptations have been shit forever, right? They are like mediocre at best and absolute disasters at worst. And that has been pretty much the trend ever since movies were being made of video games and TV shows were being made of video games. There's the odd, like, slight exception. I know some people love the animated Castlevania show. I thought it was okay. I watched the first season. It was fine. It didn't feel like must see. It didn't feel, and admittedly, I'm not a big animation guy, so it doesn't necessarily appeal. But any other attempts, like that Resident Evil show that came out last year was dreadful. It almost became entertaining because it was so funny bad, but it wasn't good. It was poor. Multiple attempts at Tomb Raider, poor. Some of the Mortal Kombat stuff is kind of fun, but not because it's good, because it's whatever. Like, this feels like a genuine first attempt to actually take the story seriously and treat the narrative that it's adapting like it actually is worth adapting properly. And that's not to say that you never change anything. You know, adaptation inherently means that you do have to change some things to fit the different medium that you're making the story for. But like the attention to detail in this first episode, like the idea that at one point Sarah gets a movie for Joel to watch that he likes, and it's a fake movie that is referenced in the game. It's just an Easter egg. It's not important, but it's this little Easter egg that if you've played the game, you'll appreciate that they took that time to, and obviously again, having the creator of the game be one of the main creative voices on the show is a big part of that. He's obviously caring about making sure all of this is a loving recreation of what he made in the first place. So little things like that, just like pepper it up. But then there's all these added things, like the opening scene set in the 60s. It's like a talk show from the 60s. I'm talking about potential pandemics, and there's a random John Hannah appears. Basically, it's like someone, we went back in time and we found like someone theorizing that something like this could happen someday. The way it ties into the idea of a pandemic, which we're all very familiar with, but also ties it into climate change, and that's why things are changing, because different species of fungi are having to evolve to deal with the fact that the planet's a little bit hotter and things like that. I thought that was a really inspired touch. It really set up the mood. It was very well directed. I got this sense of like impending doom from it, which was very good. In fact, it's probably the most Chernobyl-y thing about the episode. That makes me think, maybe it's just because it's set in the past and it's guys in suits like talking about science, but it definitely gave me those kind of vibes. Yeah, I thought the performances, as far as adaptations especially, like the performances are great, but even just on their own, they're very compelling because the chemistry is just firing off all over the place and in very different ways. Especially, because like the first half of the episode is like set, 2003, barring the opening scene obviously, which is the 60s, but you've got the backstory of 2003, and then you've got the main part of the story kicking off in 2023, but it spends a good 30 plus minutes before it gets to that point. It really lets us, and that's mirroring the game, it's mirroring how the game was structured, but it really gives you a chance to care about some of these things going on. So I'm going to give the spoiler warning. I think I just want to talk about stuff now. So full spoilers for The Last of Us Episode 1, but I give it a wholehearted recommendation, and it really does feel like the first must-see TV show of the year, right? And admittedly, we're only a couple of weeks in, so not a lot of competition as of yet. Absolutely, like I'm all in, and all the reviewers who got like press copies, like they got the whole season, and the Rotten Tomatoes scores through the roof. Like they're like everything has been very well reviewed, so I'm very excited, especially after experiencing the first episode for myself. One of the smart things that this show does, and the game did it as well, is that the first part of the show, in 2003 specifically, the daughter Sarah is the protagonist. And that was true in the game as well. When you started the game, you controlled her. You walked around the house with her, and it wasn't a lot, but you experienced that start through her lens. So you connected more with her. And it's really smart because obviously we're in spoilers now. She is going to die. And so much of the driving force of this show, and particularly for Joel's character, is that he lost his daughter. That he was there, she got shot, and he couldn't save her. And making the audience care about her because she's the protagonist, because she's the really likable one making the nice jokes, she's cracking jokes about her father getting old, and all these little lines that are sprinkled throughout just to like really make her likable and make it feel like they've got a very healthy relationship. Even though he's breaking promises, he's getting home late, she's still got a very good attitude about it. So you kind of like see her as being a little older, and she's acting older than she should be. She's kind of a little grown up because she needs to be. She's the one making breakfast. It's a bit, this is not like an original thing that you have the idea of the teen daughter who's already kind of like leveled up to deal with the fact that her single father is incapable of doing some simple things. Tried and true, but it works very well. And so when she dies, we have the great sequence in the truck where we're seeing the chaos around and she's getting scared. The adults are kind of avoiding her questions because they don't really know the answers as to what's going on. They don't really know where's safe and where to go. They're just kind of winging it. And it recreates all that stuff from the game of going out of the town and running around. But ultimately with, the soldier who's ordered to shoot Joel and Sarah because they might be infected. There's no point in taking the risk that they might not be. And Tommy shows up and saves the day, but not before Sarah gets hit. Letting us care for Sarah the way that Joel does as a father and then ripping her away is a very, very good way of putting us in his shoes. Because you could start it where we're following him And it makes sense. He's the main character. It makes sense to start the show looking or learning about the world through the lens of him. But we don't. We learn through her. So when she's ripped away from us, it's more personal to the audience because she's the one that we've connected to the most. Yeah, because you've seen like many movies and TV shows where like a father loses a daughter or something like that, and like you're constantly, you still follow the father, but you're constantly like, it shows you how much she means to him. But instead, it forms a direct connection between her and the audience. So when she's ripped away, you feel something similar to Joel. So when it cuts to 2023 and he's now on his own and it's a much darker world and he's feeling, desolate and everything's terrible, you actually find yourself relating to him. And it's a really quick way of then switching over to following him. And even though he clearly, like, it does this thing where very early on, I think it's Robert's the guy who's like got Tess, and he's worried that if Joel finds out that Tess has been hurt, that he's going to come after him. Like, it sells this idea that people are scared of what Joel might do. So it hints that he has like lost it in the past and been violent. It hints at a lot of things that suggest that he has a temper, suggest that he can be a dangerous person, and that possibly because of what happened to his daughter, that he is a much colder, more vicious person as a result. And that is seeded well, and you still sort of follow him, but because you feel so heartbroken over what's happened to his daughter, and you've felt that rip as well, because of that, you don't necessarily just like fear him yourself. You feel this sense of empathy at the very least. Certainly you feel like you're almost rooting for him to like maybe beat certain people up. You kind of want him to get a little bit of revenge in the world for what it's taken from him. And something The Last of Us as a story does so well is that it makes you kind of examine those feelings and why you feel that way, and is it right to feel those things. And like this first episode is already like showing me that it feels like it's nailing that element of it. And it makes sense because it's character stuff. But, it doesn't have to be a video game that's being played to succeed in that. But some of the stuff that it does here in the 2023 section is, obviously it gives you a little bit more of Tess. Because I think in the game you only meet Tess when Joel runs into her, when she comes back to his place. You don't really meet Ellie until Joel meets Ellie. Whereas in the show, they actually introduced Ellie separately with the Fireflies, and again, if you've played the game, you understand the context of all of it, because none of it's like out of left field. It all feels like it makes sense in the context of where the scene that we know from the game is definitely coming up, but we're getting a little bit more before we get there. So it introduces you to Ellie a little bit separately, and hints that she is important. That hints that in some level the end of the episode, more or less is the reveal that she has been bit. It sort of like tells you that earlier on with the sensor, but it doesn't explain it all that much. But it's Joel and Tess finding out that she's been bit. But Ellie says, no, this is 3 weeks old, I've not turned. And it makes it very clear throughout the episode. There's like a poster at one point that says how long it takes to turn, if depending on where you're bit. It takes a little bit longer if it's your legs. I think it said it took hours if it was your leg. But if you get bit in the head or neck, it's like minutes. So it's setting that up. So at the end, when she says it's been 3 weeks and I've not turned, it's kind of a big deal. Marlene, the head of the Fireflies in Boston, who is this group that's fighting for democracy again, and sort of they're just kind of labeled as terrorists by the powers in charge. But she, as soon as like they've realized like that she is seemingly immune to this virus, that she is suddenly very important, and they have to transport her somewhere. Obviously I know where and whatnot because I've played the game, but I'll leave that out of this. The way she reacts when they encounter Joel, we get the cool stuff with Joel and Tess sneaking through. We see the spores on the dead guy on the wall. That looked great. That looked like just like the game. It looked perfect. It felt like the game just came to life. And if you want an adaptation of something that you're a fan of, and I'm not a big book reader, so I don't tend to have a lot of that typically. I get it maybe from comic books occasionally because I do read comic books, but this was kind of special to see this. It felt kind of cool. But when they all run into each other and it becomes like, hey, you have to get Ellie out of the city for us, because we were going to do it. We're going to do it as a team, but because this firefight broke out with Robert and like half my people are dead, I'm bleeding. You're going to have to do it for me, Joel. everything with Joel like pointing the gun at Ellie, and immediately like because Tess has already put her gun down because she wants to try and get Joel and Tess. Sorry, Marlene's already put her gun down because she wants to get Joel and Tess on her side. As soon as Joel points the gun at Ellie, like the guns go back up. It's like, no, not at her. You don't point them at her. Point them at us. That's fine. You don't point them at her. And it's selling you how important it is. The idea that Marlene is willing to die to protect Ellie for whatever she can, whatever she can do. Like, can she like help solve this world that we're in? Possibly. So, it sets up the story beats really well. And just the little things like, the moment where Joel's like having to wait with Ellie for Tess to go and check out the city and find out where they can sneak out, and Ellie just mentions the watch being broken. It's just a great little link back to the past, a link back to what Joel's went through. And I thought that's the other thing they did really well is the mirroring of like having the gun pointed at him from the soldier at the end of the episode, that mirroring when he was holding Sarah in 2003, and that making him snap and beat the shit out of him. It was very good because it played a little bit differently in the game, from what I recall. There's like multiple soldiers. Ellie stabs one, and then just a fight breaks out, and they just kind of like win to survive effectively. Whereas here, Joel's kind of in a standoff and snaps and punches the shit out of him, and we get a real glimpse early on here of like Joel losing his control and being this violent person, and then looking back at Ellie and seeing her reaction to his like bloody tirade that he's just went through. Also fascinating. It makes me really excited to see how they develop this relationship, because even just the little glimpses we get of their interactions here, where she's giving him some snark, she's figuring out that the songs on the radio are code for like stuff that's going on. The idea a song from the 80s means danger, which is, we end the episode with a song from the 80s playing as we get that great shot of them walking into the city with the building toppled over, which is right out of the game. All really good. The soldiers' outfits look authentic and accurate from the game. Like all this stuff is great, and it all does a great job of building the sense of dread and like the danger. We hear some noises. As the camera's pulling up at the end, we hear noises of the various monsters that are awaiting in the city. And again, I'm dancing around exactly. I'm not going to use any like specifics because if you've not played the game and you're watching this for the first time, I think you should be able to just enjoy it for what it is. And I think this is going to find a whole new audience because it is exceptionally well done TV. It's one of the creators of Chernobyl with the creator of the game, and everything from the performances, the direction is pin sharp. It feels like it's got a lot of money behind it. I felt like I was looking at the streets of the quarantine city from the game as I was watching the episode. This episode establishes some key things. Introduces the scanner, that takes a little blood sample to check if they're infected. It introduces that early on so that we have context for it later in the episode. So even if you've not played the game, you understand it. They introduced it, so at the end of the game, you understand it. They also do a better job, arguably a better job than the game does, because the game, because it's one big thing, they can kind of get away with holding back some certain things a little bit. I feel like one of the changes they made slightly is just to explain what the Fireflies are just a little bit more in this episode. There's just a little bit of dialogue here or there to explain what the Fireflies are. And that's one of the scenes where like Marlene's with her lieutenants and she's like talking to them about what they're going to do with Ellie. It's just a little bit more so that I think for new people especially, you get the context of what the political climate is, what the Fireflies actually are, and just to understand that a little bit better. Because in the game, when the stuff's going off at the start of the story and there's explosions and we get to the Fireflies, we kind of learn a bit more as it goes on, more context about what the Fireflies are. Joel and Ellie talk about it later, kind of thing. Whereas here, I think they have to establish it a little bit clearer, just so that this first episode works on its own as a full chapter, which it does. It is a long episode. It's an hour and 20 minutes, and I think the reason why it's a longer episode, by and large, is because they really wanted to give you that full, 30-minute prologue portion. I think when you've taken that out and you're down to like 50 minutes, you're almost at a full episode length for what I presume the rest of the episodes are going to be. Honestly, they've nailed the characters so well, and they're all compelling. Obviously, Anna Torv plays Tess. I should mention her because I'm a big Fringe fan, so it was nice seeing her there as well, of course. The key thing is, though, is that Joel's anger is compelling, and I think because of what we see him go through, and because we feel the loss of Sarah as well, we relate to it, and we can sort of understand it, and I think he's very engaging as a character, even though he's not necessarily a goody two shoes, like, just likable dude on his own. But there's little glimpses of it because he's likable talking to other characters. He cares about people. He cares about Tess. He wants to go and beat up Robert or whatever because of what he did to her. So he does have loyalty. He does have good qualities that we can recognize. Ellie seems likable so far. She's very confrontational. She's a little rebel. And that comes across really well. And like I say, they did a great job of making Sarah super likable so that you are hurt when she dies. And there's other little touches. The old gran from next door in the wheelchair in the background when Sarah's looking at the DVDs and she starts to sort of move a little bit like she's infected in the background. That was one of the things that they expanded upon a little bit, is the idea that she goes next door to the neighbors, and it's this old woman, because in the game, we just see a neighbor come through the window, through the patio door in the house. Here in the show, they introduced this neighbor earlier on, and we see that she's this old woman who needs to be spoon fed. She is the most unthreatening being imaginable. So it actually sells the threat even more. That she's the one who's clicking and running and coming after Sarah. All that was super exciting. The plane coming down, the all the chaos in the streets. It felt like a lot of work went into this and really capturing the chaos of it all. And the post-apocalypse feels exciting to be in. It doesn't, it feels like it has a clear direction. And I think people might compare it to other post-apocalyptic shows. The most obvious one's probably Walking Dead. And Walking Dead very quickly felt like it was spinning its wheels, which is why I stopped watching it. It's why a lot of people, I think, stopped watching it, even though it was still very successful. Knowing they have a full story to adapt, and they're doing 9 episodes that are adapting the first video game, is very exciting, because it feels like there's nothing in this that I would describe as remotely spinning its wheels or filler, or everything's got a purpose. Everything's introducing a concept, a character, teasing the horror to come, or building on the themes that are established early on. Yeah, this was one of the best first episodes of anything I've seen in quite some time, and it's nailing all the elements that it needs to work, both as just a standalone show, but also as a Last of Us adaptation. Needless to say, I cannot wait for episode 2, and I am looking forward to lots of other moments from the game showing up, because I know where they're coming, and I think they mention a couple of names in this. I think at one point Ellie overhears Joel mention someone named Bill, which I know who that is from the games. But here it's just a name. But again, it's okay, all right. I'm hearing these teases. I'm hearing these hints. And that's not to say that they're just these little hints and teases for people who have played the games. They're perfectly valid, just kind of setting up things for the show itself. But if you have played the games, it's exciting to get these little breadcrumbs of oh, this is coming. Oh, they're already talking about this, and we're getting little hints of that, and so on and so on. So I'm trying to remember if there's any particular details that I would like to get to. They set up the ration cards, and they're bartering with those, and just these other little details that establish the world a little bit. But no, I'm excited. I mean, I know they took away the spores in the air. They took away the need for the gas masks, which was something that I think that was just a conscious choice. Even though it's cool in the game where it's very atmospheric, where you're putting on the gas masks and wandering through the dark tunnels and stuff, I think having to always be aware of this and have know when the characters need to put on the gas masks would be kind of a pain to deal with. Maybe as a TV show, there'd maybe be a lot of times where the audience might go, why aren't they wearing gas masks right now? Aren't they going to be infected? And also it might also just be a simple case of the same reason why you always have Captain America and Iron Man with their helmets and stuff off, is because ultimately they want their actors that they're paying a reasonable amount of money for to have their faces on screen as much as possible, so they don't want to be constantly covering them up with masks. So I understand the choice. I get the practical reasons for it more than anything. But yeah, so I guess that's one little change that is worth mentioning. I mean, everything else is just, just makes sense in adapting from an interactive game you play to a TV show. So, yeah, excellent stuff. I cannot wait for episode 2. It's good stuff. So let me know what you thought about it in the comments below. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, all that stuff. You can get me on the Twitters at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. And of course, if you want to support all the content, you can over to patreon.com/mailfuzztv and support all the content. And that's about it. So thank you very much. I'll see you next time. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?